Joining us right now to talk some Nats baseball. He covers the Nats for Mass and Sports is Mark Zuckerman. Hey, Mark.
Good morning. How you guys doing?
Doing great. You know what? James Wood has been as good as advertised so far, huh?
Yeah, I would say so. And, you go into these things and you try to set the bar low just in case, he doesn't turn out to be everything that he's supposed to be. But 1 week into this, he has been everything he's supposed to be. And it's remarkable as a 21-year-old already batting third in their lineup and giving them more quality at bats than pretty much anyone else they have out there. And he's just got a great approach. He takes walks. He drives the ball to the opposite field. It's been exactly what they hoped he would be, and I'm sure there at some point here is going to be a little bit of a slump, but it's just remarkable because they've had so many over the years of these guys who come in with all this hype, and for the most part they've all lived up to it. And I keep saying, it doesn't usually work this way. In their case, most of these big name guys they've called up along the way have actually proven to be really good right away and even at a young age.
So, Mark, lost in the euphoria of James Wood's call-up is the fact that Joey Meneses had to get sent down. He was a good human interest story from him, the fact that he didn't break into the big leagues until he was 30 years old, had some good moments for the Nats. But, look, the Nats have to build for the future, and the future for them is James Wood, not a 32-year-old Joey Meneses. I just feel bad for him in that he's probably just going to fade away and maybe toil in the minors for the rest of his career. What do you think happens to Meneses from here on out?
Yeah, it obviously it's a sad development from what has been a great story. I mean, this guy spent 10 years in the minor leagues, finally gets his shot. And remember, this was the day that Juan Soto was traded. He essentially was Juan Soto's replacement a couple years ago. Homers in his debut and has this miraculous 2 months that just takes everybody by storm and kind of creates his own, or legend around himself. Now, since then, it's kind of slowly dropped off, and this year, for sure, he was not hitting with any real authority, not hitting for power. Got plenty of opportunity. You can't, say that they didn't give him his chance. I always wanted to believe that maybe he could still be a part of a team that's ready to contend in a few years, either as a DH or part-time first baseman. It's not to say that it can't happen. They're not totally ruling it out. They don't really have a first baseman of the future. That's something that they have to find, whether it's internally or externally. But he's 32 now, back in the minor leagues, and if he doesn't really turn it on there and earn his way back up, I know he's always been worried that trip back down could be his last one, that he doesn't get a chance to come back. It would be really unfortunate if that happens, but you know what? What a great story it turned into, and maybe he never would have even gotten the opportunity if not for the Soto trade 2 years ago.
Yeah, and he just needed to hit for pop, and they need power from the corner infielders.
No, 100%.
And he didn't provide it. Yeah. Talk about some of the other moves that they made. I mean, you've already mentioned Meneses, but Senzel was shipped out. I never really liked him. He didn't seem like a clubhouse guy to me. I'm not sure what his relationship with the other players was. He got into the deal with Gore earlier. I guess that was last week. But he's a good defensive player, but also didn't provide any pop. So now Lipscomb's up. I guess Lipscomb's going to be the everyday third baseman. So talk about some of these other moves they made. Yepes, if I'm pronouncing that right, at first. And obviously in addition to Wood.
Yeah, so I think in a broader sense, what they've done over the last week has been really significant. And that is, for the first time in quite a while, they are promoting young guys from within to the big leagues and cutting ties with underperforming veterans. And what we have seen in recent years, they ride this stuff out usually a little longer. They would wait. They would hope that maybe somebody got hot and then trade him at the deadline. And then if they couldn't get anything for him at the trade deadline, well, maybe they'll hang on to him for a few more months and just ride out the season like they did with Nelson Cruz and Cesar Hernandez, some other guys. Or, last year they finally released Corey Dickerson after the trade deadline once it was clear there was no market for him. But what they just did in this last week, Eddie Rosario, Joey Meneses being sent down, not DFA'd, Senzel DFA'd, they're basically saying, no, you know what? We're ready to move on here. We are willing to cut ties. We're willing to eat some salary, something they haven't necessarily done in the past. And we're ready for the young guys to take over. Now, Trey Lipscomb, we don't know what he's going to be. They love him, but he has not really shown at the big league level, at least yet, that he can hit. Defensively, he's been very good.
Right.
But they're saying, hey, go play third base for the rest of the season. Let's see what you are. Let's see if you figure into the long-term plan for them. Juan Yepes, he came from the Cardinals after he was let go last year, but he's only 26. Maybe he figures in somehow. Again, they don't have a real first baseman in their system, so maybe he can do something for them. But what I loved was the other day when they scored the 14 runs, they had a lineup with an average age of 25.
Mm-hmm.
And I think only one guy in the entire lineup was over the age of 28, and that was Jesse Winker, who's 30.
Right.
So this is a transition, and one that's been a long time in the works. A lot of people have been waiting to see it. It may involve some growing pains along the rest of the season, but at this stage of their rebuild, we're not seeing as many of these stopgap guys just to fill in who don't really figure into the long-term plan. Almost everybody who's in the field now on a daily basis could have a chance of being part of this team for the long run.
Talking to Mark Zuckerman, covers the Nationals for Masson Sports. One of those guys under 25 is C.J. Abrams at 23, makes his first All-Star team. Is the type of season he's having right now, is that what you expected? Better than what you expected at this age? Can he get better?
He can get more consistent. I think that's the biggest thing. His season's been remarkable because April was phenomenal. May, he really struggled, and you thought, well, maybe that was a fluke. Maybe he can't keep that up. And then his June wound up being even better than April was. So if you can just get to be a little more consistent with his offensive production, like you said, he's 23. He's still learning a lot of things. More recently, I've seen him be more patient at the plate, taking walks, having longer at-bats. That's a great sign for him to do that because he is sometimes a little aggressive and just swinging at the first pitch. Defensively, he's come a long way over the last year. And more than anything else, this guy embraces the spotlight. I loved yesterday was we talked to him about getting the All-Star selection. He said, hey, this is just the first of many, right? Like he's already thinking down the road of the kind of player he can be. He is right now the face of the team. James Wood could become that here soon. But at the moment, I think C.J. Abrams is the face of the Nationals, and I think it's appropriate that he's the one who's going to represent him at the All-Star game as one of the players acquired in the Soto trade, as a young, budding star at a premium position at shortstop, and who doesn't really have a problem being in the spotlight. And I like that. He embraces it. He performs. And the sky's the limit. I felt like from late last season, once he took over the leadoff role, you felt like this guy can do almost anything on the field. Hit for power, play great defense, steal bases, and be a superstar. And he's on that path right now, and I'm glad the rest of the baseball world is going to get to see that next week in Texas.
Mark, the Nats are third in Major League Baseball right now with 119 steals, 6 players with 10 or more swipes pre-All-Star break on this Nats roster. Did you see this coming during spring training at West Palm? Was this something that was clearly a focus during the offseason?
You could tell they were maybe gearing up for that. And it's them recognizing, and I give them credit for this, that they just did not have home run hitters in this lineup. And so if they're going to score runs, they're going to have to manufacture them. And what do they have that maybe other teams don't have? They got a lot of fast guys. So let's try to take advantage of that and the new rules that were in place last year to try to steal more bases. Now, for about a month and a half or so, it was phenomenal. They were leading the league and doing it at a really high rate. I think it was like 86% was their stolen base rate, which is phenomenal. Now, since then, teams have caught on, and you're seeing more pickoff attempts. You're seeing pitchers and catchers opposing doing a better job of trying to cut them down, and the rate has gone way, way down, like into the 50s, and that's not going to work. So they need to make some adjustments here. They need to be smarter about it. C.J. Abrams has had a great season, but he's been picked off, I think, 8 times now. He's got to watch that. He's got to be more cautious with that kind of thing, and a lot of them do. So they want to be aggressive on the bases. That's going to have to be their identity because they're not going to score runs in bunches otherwise. But you got to be careful. You can't just run yourself into outs and give outs away. They're not good enough to be able to do that at this point. So I think they're going to keep it up, but they need to be a little smarter with it. Make sure they're reading opposing pitchers. Make sure they're going to the plate before they take off, all that kind of stuff. And hopefully in the end, we'll look back and say, wow, this was a really good base running team Right now, they're a really fast team that's stolen a lot of bases, but they're still learning how to be a good base running team.
So we're at July 8th, so we got about 23 days before the deadline. Which players, I assume Winker's one. I've heard Lane Thomas, Finnegan, those names. Which players do you think other teams may try and pry away? I don't want Thomas to be traded. I said this a couple weeks ago. I think he's a really good player, and I think he's versatile. And, I think he's a good fielder. He's a really good base runner. He's got speed, good arm, good pop in the bat. But I don't know. Maybe Riz sees something else in the outfield besides Thomas. Can you tell me? I could see Thomas, Cruz, and Wood being an outfield. But
I know I could too.
Yes,
yeah.
But do you think that these guys will be dealt?
So I think the real dilemma here is going to be, what do you do with the guys who are under control beyond this year? Jesse Winker is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. He's having a great year, bounce back season. Of course, you move him, whatever you can get for him. Ideally, Patrick Corbin and Trevor Williams would have been in that boat, but Williams is hurt. Corbin, maybe there's something to be gotten for him. I don't know at this point how much you can expect. So those kind of guys, yes. Now, Thomas, Finnegan, Harvey are the big three who are under control for one more year after this. Now, a year ago, their names came up, and Rizzo listened but said ultimately nobody else valued them the way the Nats did. And he said, hey, we've got these guys for a few more years. Let's hang on to them. And you're kind of in the same boat now. Now, I think we're at a point where you're starting to say, okay, the odds of them actually contending this year are time's running out for that.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
So you're really looking ahead to next year. But if you believe next year can be a contending year, and I think they do believe that, then are you really going to part ways with guys who've kind of been important pieces for you, especially the two relievers in Finnegan and Harvey? And Thomas, yeah, I know you have more outfielders coming, but he's already established. He's already proven what he is at the big league level. We don't know when Dylan Cruz is going to arrive or what he's going to be. We don't know if Jacob Young is going to, ultimately show that he is an everyday center fielder in the big leagues. So to me, unless he's blown away with an offer for those guys, I think you hang on to them because I think they can be a big part of a team next year that believes it's going to win. And then, they'll be free agents after that. But at some point, you got to stop trading guys away for the future. You've got to be trying to win right now. And I think by 2025, they could be in that position.
Mark, pretty ominous sign that Josiah Gray was moved to the 60-day IL. That was on Friday, looking like a just completely lost season for him at this point. I know they're going to reassess in a few months, but not looking good after he struggled in his latest rehab start.
No, and it was unfortunate because he had a really good start right before that at Rochester, and the thought was, well, maybe he's ready to come back. And they decided to give him one more, and that one did not go well at all, and the velocity was down. He only went 3 innings, and then he told them that he was feeling elbow pain again. So I said, okay, hang on, we're going to shut this down. During the All-Star break, he's going to Dallas to be examined by Keith Meister, who's one of these orthopedists who works on a lot of guys and is one of the Tommy John doctors right now. Now, not saying that's definitely going to happen, but I think there is some real concern that could be where this is headed. And if it were that, you're not just talking about losing this year, but now you're talking about losing most of next year as well. Now, again, it may not be. They look at it, they decide, nope, it's not torn. You don't have to do the surgery, or there's something else we can do that's a shorter time frame. That's still, possibility out there. But there is genuine concern about that, and it's just really disappointing for everyone because this guy was your opening day starter. He was an all-star last year. And even though some other young guys have stepped up this season and have helped offset that loss, you still wanted him to be a big part of this as you're moving forward. And if it is the worst-case scenario, like it could be, you're talking about him really not being a part of the rotation again until late next season, and then who knows what he is at that point.
Yeah, it's sad. Hopefully it's not as serious. All right, a couple of the minor leaguers we want to talk about before we let you go. Dylan Cruz, you mentioned, just looking at the numbers. He's got 8 bombs, 50 RBIs, 18 stolen bases, hitting .265 at AAA. He hit a home run on Friday. He had 2 more hits on Saturday. Do you think we're going to see him this year? And then Brady House, his numbers aren't as good, but he's got some pop. He's a AA, not AAA, but he's got 13 bombs. Is he someone we could see possibly before the end of the year?
So my feeling all along with Cruz especially was if he's at AAA by July 1st, then that at least opens the possibility that we see him before the end of the year. So he was. He got there in mid to late June, right when James Wood was coming back from the IL. He hasn't been dominant, but he's been good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if he performs the way they believe he can, that there is a good chance we see him here before the end of the year. And, remember, he's just drafted a year ago. So it's not like it's urgent they have to rush him, but you'd like to see that, especially when his old LSU teammate Paul Skeens is not only in the big leagues now, but is an all-star after only 10 starts for the Pirates. So I'm sure there's some motivation to let Cruz come up here and show everyone he can be as well. Now, Brady House just yesterday was promoted to AAA as well.
Okay, cool.
And so that signals to me that they're at least open to the idea that he could be up here before the end of the year. And so, we talked about the youth movement, the moves they already made in the last week. Come September, if there's a chance that we see a lineup that includes James Wood, Dylan Cruz, Brady House, C.J. Abrams, Jacob Young, Luis Garcia,
mm-hmm.
that would be a perfect scenario for the Nationals. Now, maybe they don't all work out. Maybe they struggle. Maybe not every single one of those guys is there. But just think back over the last 3 years of where they've come from and the kind of teams they were fielding there the last 2 seasons. If they could end this season with all those young cornerstones in the big leagues, that sets them up for next year. And I think that now finally moves this rebuild into that next phase where, okay, they're now here and at the big league level and now hoping to start winning again.
Real quick, last question. What's Brady House's his defensive prowess? Is he a pretty good infielder? I haven't heard anything about that.
Yeah, so he was drafted as a shortstop out of high school. He
Right.
had a bunch of back problems a couple of years ago, so they moved him to third base. The book on him is that he's made some real strides at third base and has become a good one there.
Good.
I've only got to see him a little bit in spring training, so that's the hope. But let's be clear, his future is as a hitter.
Right.
Wherever he ends up playing, he's a power hitter, and that's what his calling card's going to be. But the hope would be, yes, that he can be a quality third baseman as well. And that's where it's interesting with Trey Lipscomb now playing third at the big league level. He's probably known more for defense, House more for the bat. By the end of this year, they hope to know which of those two ultimately could be their third baseman in the future.